Frank, what's going on? Legal called an emergency session and nobody will tell me why.
Sit down, Jackson.
What is this? Default notice time from who?
Sinclair Manufacturing, our primary supplier. They pulled the credit line this morning.
Pulled it? Why would they just pull it?
Because the personal guarantee backing that contract was withdrawn.
Withdrawn by who? I didn't sign anything withdrawing.
It wasn't your guarantee, Jackson. It was Amara's.
The rain fell soft and gray over Cedar Hill Cemetery, the day they buried Robert Reed, founder of Reed Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had survived 3 recessions and one very public lawsuit. Jackson stood at the graveside in a suit that didn't quite fit, bought in a hurry. 3 days after his father's heart gave out in his office at 11:47 p.m. Jackson was 29. He had a business degree he barely used, a fondness for expensive watches, and absolutely no idea how to run a company. His father had kept him close, but never let him steer. "You'll learn when you have to," Robert used to say. Now, Jackson had to. Beside him, holding his hand tightly, stood Amara. She wore black, simple and dignified, her expression steady even as Jackson's mother, Diane, shot glances at her that could curdle milk. Amara had been dating Jackson for 2 years. She was smart, sharper than Jackson, if anyone had bothered to ask around town, with a master's degree in business finance and 3 years of experience turning around a failing logistics firm before she ever met him. Diane Reed did not approve. She never said it outright at the funeral, that would have been unseemly, but the way her eyes moved over Amara, up and down, said more than words ever could. After the service, in the black town car headed back to the estate, Diane finally spoke. "You'll need real guidance now, Jackson." Not. She paused, choosing her words like stepping stones over a river, not distractions. Jackson frowned. "Mom, Amara's not a distraction. She's helped me more than you know. She's helped herself to your time," Diane said coolly. "There's a difference." Jackson said nothing. He looked out the window instead, watching the cemetery gates shrink behind them, wondering what his father would have said. Robert had liked Amara, actually. He'd told Jackson once, over cigars on the porch, "That girl's got a mind for business your friends only pretend to have." But Robert wasn't here anymore to defend her. Now it was just Jackson, his mother, his Uncle Frank, who sat on the company's board, and a company teetering on the edge of confusion. Reed Industries was not in good shape. Robert had been a brilliant engineer, but a stubborn businessman, resistant to modernizing. The company still ran on decade-old software, had no real digital sales strategy, and was bleeding contracts to competitors who could quote faster and ship smarter. Jackson walked into the office on his first official day as CEO and felt the floor tilt beneath him. Spreadsheets he didn't understand. Board members who spoke a language of margins and liabilities he'd never bothered to learn. A workforce of 400 people looking to him for direction he did not have. That night, he sat at his father's old desk, head in his hands, and called Amara. She came over within the hour, not with sympathy with a legal pad. "Okay," she said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "Walk me through what you saw today, everything. Don't filter it." For the next 3 hours, Jackson talked and Amara listened, occasionally stopping him to ask sharp, specific questions. By midnight, she had sketched out a rough diagnosis. Outdated operations, an untrained sales pipeline, a company relying on legacy contracts that were about to expire, and zero digital infrastructure. "You're not going to fix this by yourself," she told him. "Not because you're incapable, because you don't have time to learn everything from scratch while the ship is sinking. You need someone in the room who already knows the water." "Are you offering?" Jackson asked. Amara smiled, tired but certain. "I'm telling you, I already started." Over the following 18 months, something remarkable happened. Amara didn't just advise from the sidelines, she became the architect of the company's survival. She restructured the sales department, negotiated new supplier contracts that cut costs by 20%, and pushed Jackson to invest in a digital ordering platform that opened Reed Industries to clients across 3 new states. She worked 80-hour weeks without a formal title, without a formal salary for the first 6 months, because Jackson had asked her to help him figure things out. And she believed in what the company could become, and more than that, she believed in him. Slowly, the numbers turned. Revenue that had flatlined under Robert's final years began climbing. A local business journal ran a feature, Reed Industries, a legacy reimagined. The photo accompanying the article showed Jackson shaking hands with a new client. Amara stood just outside the frame, cropped out by an editor who assumed she was an assistant. She never complained about that. She just kept working. By year 2, Reed Industries had grown 35%. Jackson gave a speech at the company's anniversary gala, thanking the employees, thanking the board, thanking his late father's vision. He did not mention Amara's name once. Later that night, in the car, she asked him about it gently, not accusingly. "You didn't mention me tonight." Jackson looked uncomfortable. "I didn't want it to seem like I don't know. Like this was about us instead of the company." "It is about us," Amara said quietly. "I built this with you, Jackson, not behind you." He reached for her hand. "I know. I'm sorry. Next time." There was no next time. Not the way she meant. Diane Reed had never stopped working on her son. She was patient about it, the way a sculptor is patient with stone-small chips, repeated pressure, never one blow big enough to be noticed. "People are talking," she told Jackson over dinner one evening, Frank nodding beside her like a metronome. "Talking about what?" Jackson asked. "About the optics," Frank said. "You're the face of this company now. Investors want to see stability, tradition, a wife who fits the image of the Reed name. Amara built this company back from nothing," Jackson said, his voice edged with something close to anger. "She's talented. No one's arguing that," Diane said smoothly. "But talented isn't the same as suitable, Jackson. This family has a certain standing in this town. People whisper. Clients ask questions. Do you really think the Whitfield account would have signed with us if their CFO knew your girlfriend was?" She stopped herself, as if the word itself was too vulgar to finish, though everyone at the table understood exactly what she meant. Jackson set down his fork. "Finish the sentence, Mom." Diane didn't. She didn't have to. The silence did the work. "She's black, Jackson," Frank said finally, blunt where Diane was careful. "And I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's reality. This industry, our clients, our investors, a lot of them are old money, old thinking. It affects business. It affects how people see you." Jackson sat there, jaw tight, saying nothing. And that silence, that failure to defend her, would become the crack that split everything apart. It didn't happen all at once. Diane was too skilled for that. It happened in small comments over weeks, then months. A dinner Amara wasn't invited to. A family photo where she was conveniently left out of the frame for time. A remark from Diane at a charity event, delivered with a smile. "Oh, Amara's not family, dear. She's just around." Jackson began to change. Subtly at first. He stopped correcting his mother when she introduced Amara as his associate. He started attending family strategy dinners without her, telling himself it was just business. He let Frank sit in meetings where Amara's ideas were quietly credited to someone else. Amara noticed everything. She was not a fool, and she had not built a company's turnaround by missing details. but she loved Jackson. And love has a way of asking you to be patient long after patience has stopped being wise. The breaking point came 6 months later, at the company's board dinner, where Reed Industries was being celebrated for landing its largest contract in company history, a contract Amara herself had spent 4 months negotiating, flying to 3 states, redrafting terms twice after the client balked. At the dinner, Frank stood to give a toast. He praised Jackson's leadership, his father's legacy, the Reed family's unshakable vision. He did not say Amara's name. Jackson, sitting at the head of the table, raised his glass along with everyone else. Amara sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, and understood with total clarity exactly where she stood in this family's eyes. Not a partner, not even an employee worth naming, a useful shadow. She didn't make a scene. She smiled through the rest of the dinner. But something inside her had already made a decision. 2 weeks later, Diane made her final move. She sat Jackson down alone, no dinner, no audience, just the two of them in the study that still smelled faintly of his father's cigars. "I'm not asking you to hate her," Diane said. "I'm asking you to think about your future, about children, about the board, about the name on that building downtown. You can be grateful to her and still walk away, Jackson. Gratitude isn't the same as forever. She built this company back up, Mom. I would have lost everything without her." "And she'll be fine," Diane said. "Smart women like that always land on their feet. But this family, this company, it needs you to make the right choice, not the comfortable one." Jackson didn't respond right away. He thought about the board's raised eyebrows, the clients who made pointed comments about keeping things traditional, the quiet, constant hum of disapproval that had followed him and Amara for 2 years. He was tired of defending a choice he was supposed to be proud of. That night, he called Amara and asked her to come by the house. Jackson had no answer. There wasn't one that wouldn't have been a lie. Amara picked up her coat. At the door, she turned back one last time. "You should read your investment agreements more carefully, Jackson." "I did." She left. Jackson didn't understand what she meant. He would understand very soon. What Jackson didn't know, what he had never bothered to ask about, because he trusted Amara completely and never imagined he'd need the details, was the exact structure of the company's finances over the past 2 years. When Reed Industries had been drowning, Amara hadn't just contributed labor and strategy. She had personally invested a significant portion of her own savings and secured 2 private loans under her name to keep the company's payroll running during its most dangerous quarter. A bridge that kept 400 employees paid while Jackson negotiated a slow-moving bank loan that took 9 months to clear. She had also personally guaranteed a critical supplier contract using her own credit and a legal agreement that gave her direct financial standing in the company's operations. Not just an emotional one. At the time, Jackson had been relieved and grateful, signing whatever paperwork she put in front of him without truly reading it, trusting her completely. That trust, once absolute, was the very thing that gave her legal power now. Within a week of the breakup, Amara formally withdrew her financial guarantees. She called in the private loans she had co-signed. She terminated her personal backing of the supplier agreement, which caused the supplier to freeze shipments immediately, citing breach of terms. She notified the bank that the informal financial bridge she had arranged during the crisis period was no longer available. She did it cleanly, legally, and without a single raised voice. Every document was in order. Every notice was properly filed. She had, after all, spent 2 years learning this company's finances better than anyone else alive, including Jackson. The effects were immediate and brutal. Scene 8. Though within 3 weeks, Reed Industries' supply chain seized up. The company's largest supplier, no longer covered by Amara's personal guarantee, demanded immediate payment in full or halted deliveries. Deliveries the company needed to fulfill the very contract Amara herself had negotiated months earlier. Jackson scrambled. He went to the board, to Frank, to the family's usual contacts at the bank. But the numbers told a story no amount of family influence could fix. The company had been financially propped up by one person's personal risk, and that person was gone. Frank, for all his talk of tradition and business sense, had no answers. Diane, for all her talk of the right choice, had no solution either. The board, blindsided by how deeply embedded Amara's financial fingerprints were in the company's stability, began asking Jackson uncomfortable questions he could not answer. Within 2 months, Reed Industries missed payroll for the first time in its history. Within 4 months, it defaulted on the supplier contract entirely, triggering a breach of contract clause that came with steep penalties. Clients who had been drawn in by the company's smooth, professional turnaround, the turnaround Amara had engineered, began pulling their business, spooked by the sudden instability. By month 6, Reed Industries filed for bankruptcy. The company Robert Reed had spent 30 years building, the company Jackson had inherited without ever truly understanding it, collapsed in less than half a year. Not because Amara sabotaged it, but because she simply stopped holding it up. She had never owed them her sacrifice in the first place. She had given it freely, out of love, and taken it back the moment that love was treated as disposable. But the story didn't end with bankruptcy. During the unraveling, financial auditors combing through the wreckage discovered something troubling. Several documents bearing Amara's financial guarantees and contributions had been altered in internal company records. Someone, later revealed to be Frank, in a panicked attempt to minimize the appearance of the family's dependence on an outsider, had adjusted internal paperwork to downplay Amara's ownership stake and financial contributions, effectively trying to erase her role from the company's official history. It was a mistake that would cost the Reed family everything. Amara's lawyers, sharp and thorough, found the discrepancies immediately. She filed suit, not out of spite, but because the altered documents constituted fraud, and because her original agreements, the ones Jackson had signed without reading closely, entitled her to compensation and equity far beyond what the family had ever acknowledged. The case became a local sensation. Reporters who had once written glowing profiles of Jackson Reed's leadership now dug into the real story. The woman behind the turnaround, systematically erased from the narrative, then financially and legally wronged when she was no longer convenient. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, signed guarantees, email correspondence spanning 2 years, in which Amara's strategic decisions were documented in granular, undeniable detail. Text messages from Frank discussing how to handle the optics of her contributions. The altered internal paperwork, which Frank could not adequately explain under cross-examination. Jackson took the stand, visibly diminished from the confident young CEO he'd been at that anniversary gala 2 years earlier, when his own lawyer asked him to describe Amara's role in the company's turnaround. He had no way to minimize it anymore. He told the truth finally, months too late to matter. "She built it," he said quietly. "I just had the last name." The judge ruled in Amara's favor on every major count: breach of contract, fraudulent alteration of records, and unjust enrichment. The settlement was staggering. Full repayment of her original investments with interest, damages for the fraudulent documentation, and, because of the specific structure of the guarantees she had once put in place, a controlling equity stake in whatever remained of Reed Industries' assets. Reed Industries, as the Reed family had known it, no longer existed. But its assets, its equipment, its skilled workforce, its client relationships, all of it was still there, waiting for someone with the vision to rebuild it. Amara didn't rebuild it out of vengeance. She rebuilt it because she had always seen what it could become, long before anyone gave her the credit for seeing it. She acquired the company's remaining assets through the settlement and relaunched it under a new name, Johnson Manufacturing Group. Within a year, it had not only recovered its former revenue, it had exceeded it by 40%. She modernized every process she had once fought to implement as an outsider with no formal title. This time, there was no board second-guessing her, no family whispering behind closed doors, no one cropping her out of photographs. She hired based on merit. She built a leadership team that reflected the diversity she had been denied a seat at the table for. She became, within 3 years, one of the most respected executives in the state. Featured on the cover of the very same business journal that had once cropped her out of a photograph. The article's headline read, "The comeback no one saw coming, except her." Jackson lost more than a company. He lost the name his father had built, forced to watch it be reborn under someone else's leadership. Someone who had once loved him and had been willing to give him everything. If only he'd been willing to stand beside her when it mattered. Diane and Frank, exposed publicly for their role in the fraud and the family's discriminatory treatment of Amara, saw their own reputations crumble. Frank faced separate legal consequences for the falsified records. Diane, who had spent her life curating the Reed family's social standing, found herself the subject of the very whispers she'd once weaponized against someone else. Jackson, humbled and much poorer, took a quiet job at a smaller firm across town, rebuilding a career from far closer to the ground than he'd ever expected to start from. He never spoke publicly about Amara. When asked by a reporter, years later, what he'd learned from everything that happened, he gave a short, honest answer. That the people who really build something rarely get their names on the door, and if you're not willing to fight for them when it's hard, you don't deserve to stand next to them when it's easy. Amara Johnson never set out to take anyone's company. She set out to build something worth being proud of, alongside someone she believed was worth building it for. When that belief was betrayed, not by circumstance, but by choice, she didn't beg for a seat at the table. She built her own table, and this time, no one could crop her out of the picture. Her story spread far beyond that small business journal cover. It became a case study in business schools, a cautionary tale in family-run companies about the danger of undervaluing the people who actually do the work. But more than that, it became something simpler, something people understood in their gut long before the legal details made sense. Respect isn't optional. Loyalty isn't a currency you spend on someone only when it's convenient. And the people you overlook today may be the very ones who determine your future tomorrow. Jackson inherited a company. Amara built an empire. Only one of those things can be taken away.
Before you go, let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged before people knew your story? If this video touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Your support helps us tell more powerful stories that inspire, heal, and make a difference. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.